In today's video, we have a lot of NHL trade rumors to discuss, including a potential trade between the Leafs and the Habs. Could the Oilers move goalie Jack Campbell to Chicago? We also have some trade talk involving St. Louis, Carolina, and Nashville. Plus, we have some talk around the Vancouver Canucks, big news on the NHL waiver wire, and some more news from around the league. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover today. Before we jump into the news, I still want to take another moment to do one of those This Day in Hockey History moments quickly. On this day back in 1988, Maple Leaf defenseman Boreas Salming, of course, recently passed away from complications from ALS, became the first European-born player to reach 1,000 NHL games. So certainly a big accomplishment. We've talked a bit about Salming here recently with him coming, obviously over to Toronto for Hockey Hall of Fame weekend. Here he was honored, and of course recently passed away not long after. Quite a trailblazer for a European and Swedish-born player. So certainly another big feat he accomplished on this day all those years ago. So just goes to show you just how important he was for the future of European players making the jump to the NHL, and not only making the jump, but being impact players and having a higher level of success than just barely making it, as some players before him hadn't accomplished quite as much as he did. Now, of course, the big news on the waiver wire was Jacob Vrana. Vrana was on waivers yesterday, and he cleared. Nobody picked up the goal-scoring winger from Detroit. Obviously, Jacob Vrana has this year and next on his contract, $5.25 million. Pretty good results in terms of goal scoring at 5-on-5, good speed, but at the same time, he just recently come through the player assistance program. He's only played a few games in the American Hockey League without great results. Obviously been a while since he's played the NHL game, and I think that there's obviously a lot of teams that are just skeptical and taking on the contract, not really sure what they're getting. Now, like I said before, there seems to be something happening here behind the scenes. There's going to be more to the story that we don't know. Jacob Vrana apparently had removed. Now, I haven't checked today to see if anything's changed, but as of yesterday, all mention of Detroit on all of his social media accounts had been removed. Elliot Friedman speculated and wondered, maybe there's something about Vrana being in Detroit that's not good for him. Maybe they've kind of come to the conclusion that it would be best for him to move on. I don't know, but Jeff Merrick on the Merrick Show, when him and Friedman were talking about it, also made a valid point that, obviously we don't know exactly what he was dealing with or what he's been through in the assistance program, but you would think for somebody who's just been through a lot and just was recently released from the program, that stability would be something that would be important, having a good support system. And of course, he's been in Detroit for a while, so I would hope that he would have that. I don't know if he does or not. I don't know what his family and friend situation is like, obviously, outside of the game. But, you would think up and moving to a new team way across the country or something just might not be the best. But at the same time, you have to think that there's, like I said, a disconnect of some sort. I'm thinking perhaps, the Red Wings feel he needs to stay in the AHL longer, and maybe he doesn't feel he needs to, and maybe that's the issue. I don't know, but I still think that I won't be surprised if we learn more about this here in the coming days. But for now, he's cleared and still a member of the Red Wings. The New York Rangers have made a pretty good signing, I would say, signing bottom six forward Jimmy Vesey to a 2-year contract extension at $800,000. He made his way back to the Big Apple where he got his career started and has done well. I mean, obviously, Vesey, after leaving the Rangers, the first time, bounced around a lot. He ended up in Buffalo, he ended up in Toronto, ended up in Vancouver, I believe he was in the Devils. Made his way back to the Rangers this year, and he's finally, for the first time in a while, found a little bit more higher level of success and a role that he's comfortable with that works for him and the team. So extending him in a good, bargain basement contract, $50,000 above league minimum, that's a great deal for the Rangers, and I think he's done well enough to earn that. So that's certainly good to see on his part. The Carolina Hurricanes have activated Max Pacioretty off LTIR, so he should be returning to game action here, which is great to see. Be interesting to see, as I mentioned before, how he fits in with the team, because even though he was a big offseason acquisition, he's yet to play with them due to the offseason injury. Unfortunately, the Canes have also replaced another player on LTIR, and that's Andre Kasha, again having issues with concussion. I mean, this poor guy has dealt with so much in that way. You have to think it's going to have a major impact on shortening his career. He's had so many issues that way that you just pray that he has a good quality of life, and I hope he can continue playing, but you have to wonder with him having dealt with this so much if it's even, recommended at this point. But I'm not a medical expert, so that's not my place to make a judgment call. Just know that when you've been through a lot like that, it's certainly, not always recommended you continue, but we'll see. Boston Bruins forward Jake Debrusk, after having a really good game at the Winter Classic and helping the Bruins defeat the Pittsburgh Penguins, was seen after the game in a walking boot, and now we know that he will be out for a while. Don't know exactly how long, but he has a fractured fibula, so it's certainly not going to be a short-term injury. That's for sure. They've called up Chris Wagner to take his spot on the roster. So that's going to be a big blow for them. He's been playing really well. The Red Wings have also sent down Alex Nedeljkovic to the American Hockey League on a conditioning stint where he hasn't played much here in a while. So we'll see where that goes. There were some in Detroit media that thought maybe it wouldn't be Vrana on waivers and it might even be Nedeljkovic. But at the end of the day, that didn't happen. So we'll have to see. I think there is some questionable moves coming into the crease in Detroit as well. So we'll have to see what they do. And some think that Nedeljkovic might be the guy that gets moved at Hellberg, and Husso might be the tandem they move forward with. Now, of course, the Canucks have been a team we've talked about at great length. Elliot Friedman was talking about the Vancouver Canucks again on the Jeff Merrick show. They were discussing about Connor Bedard putting on quite a remarkable show at the World Juniors and really opening the eyes of a lot of fans, probably to some degree, maybe some NHL scouts and executives. I think a lot of people that follow junior hockey and prospects knew how good he was, but I don't know that a lot of people really understood how good this kid was. I mean, if you're into prospects and you watch a lot of junior hockey, you probably had a better idea, but for the mass majority of fans, I think it's fair to say they knew the name, they heard he was really good, they might have seen a few highlights, and that's probably about as far as it went. And they were talking about whether or not the Canucks should consider tanking to really get this guy. Obviously, he's from Vancouver as well, so it would be a great fit from that sense of homecoming and be a franchise player they could certainly move forward with some of the other young talent they have on the roster. But they also debated whether or not it's too late for the Canucks to really consider tanking. And there's too many teams below them that might have way better odds. Is it really worth it? A lot of people online saying the Canucks should trade everybody, basically. But Friedman made a really good point, saying he feels that Canucks dressing room is probably shell-shocked and basically exhausted and just already had a super long season. And it's not even really half over yet, considering they've dealt with all of the talk around for the Horvat stuff, that the captain's likely being traded because they can't come to terms on an extension. We've heard all season that Bruce Boudreau was likely getting fired. Brock Besser's agent given permission to talk to teams about a trade. JT Miller's been scrutinized after, even though he doesn't see it himself, a lot of just, arguments with teammates as well as lack of effort when it comes to defensive play, back checking, giving the puck away and not doing anything to try to get it back. Things like that just really look bad on his part. So it makes a lot of sense what Friedman's saying. That Canuck team and dressing room is probably just completely shell-shocked and tired and exhausted. And they know that there's likely going to be a decent amount of players likely moved out. But it's hard to come back from that. And Bruce Boudreau certainly had some, not so flattering comments about his team after their most recent loss here. And the thing that's especially odd about this one is the Canucks did not post Boudreau's post-game media scrum. They always posted on their social medias for everybody to listen to what the coach had to say after the game, and they didn't. And I think it was because he was more critical of the team than usual. But it just really makes you wonder what's going to happen or what's going to give. But at the end of the day, these are all human beings, and you got to feel for the amount of drama that they've had to deal with there in Vancouver all year long. Now on to some different trade rumors that are coming up around the league. TheFourthPeriod.com and Dave Pagnotta has a fairly substantial couple of rumors here that he's been talking about. One being that the Maple Leafs might have interest in one of their division rivals, big rugged defenseman, and that's Habs defenseman Joel Edmonton. Now we've heard varying degrees of reports on Edmonton from different NHL reporters. Some saying that the Habs don't really want to move him. They will listen, but it's going to take an expensive return to pry him out of Montreal. Of course, he's got good size, decent mobility, a former Stanley Cup champion with the Blues in 2019. Certainly missed a fair bit of time this year. Has this year and next on his contract. Not super expensive, but it's believed that based on the D market, the way it's been between last deadline and how things have went over the summer and some of the contracts we've seen, that some of these defensemen that are even more of a defensive specialist than an offensive guy, like your Edmondsons or your Gavrkovs or some of these other guys, they might, teams feel like they're looking for first round picks. That's a pretty significant price. Sometimes, in some cases, a first and more. I don't know that the Leafs would be wise to spend that on a player like Edmonton. Now, of course, they're not likely going to have Jake Muzzin back. We don't know that 100%, but a lot of media is going on the assumption that Muzzin won't return this season. So I understand why they would want to add this type of player. I do see why there might be interest, and I think that, to me, they would only pull this off if they could get him for a better price. I think it's pretty well known that the Leafs don't want to trade Matthew Nyes. That's one prospect that there would be hands off for them. And secondly, I think they're going to try not to trade the first-round pick. I don't know that they're completely against it. I think if they can make a big deal and go for a cup, I think that they'll maybe consider it, but they would like to avoid it if at all possible. So, or maybe they deal a future first rounder. That's always a possibility as well. But certainly makes sense that Joel Edmondson would be on their radar. I think he would fit well there, be kind of defenseman they would want. As Friedman has mentioned before, he feels they're likely going to try to do 2 moves, maybe with a top 6 forward be more of a priority. But obviously, a rugged, 4-5 type defenseman would probably be in the mix too, but I think the forwards might be more of a priority for them, so I'm not really sure. I mean, there's lots of time before the deadline. Things can change, but, we'll see. Not often we see trades between the Leafs and the Habs, but the Habs have been spiraling out of control downwards here in the standings. They had a decent start, but like I said, many of us thought they were going to be a bottom dweller this year, and they've worked their way down, and then they've had some bad losses too, even with the recent trip. They just did a mom's trip on the road, a couple of bad losses to the Capitals and Predators. The Caps won, especially leaving Jake Allen in net for 9 goals. I thought that was interesting and not great, really, but at the same time, we'll see. But I think it's going to be an expensive price tag, and I'm not sure that's a deal we're going to see, but it does make some sense why they would consider it. Vladimir Tarasenko, another 4thperiod.com Dave Pagnotta rumor that they're having Tarasenko linked to 4 different teams, including the Islanders, the Avalanche, the Flames, and the Devils. Now, all of these teams make sense from various degrees. The Islanders have needed a scorer forever. The Avalanche have been decimated with injuries. I think they need more of a centerman than a winger, though. So as much as it does kind of make sense, I don't know that they go down that route, but they can use guys like Rantanen and Landeskog at center. They've done it out of necessity at times, and they've done well with it. So they could go for a winger instead, but I'm not sure that that's going to be the route they take. The Flames have been looking for a top 9 forward all season long. Tried bringing in some younger players within the organization. Hasn't quite found what they're looking for. So there is some sense there. And the Devils, of course, after a hot start, have certainly cooled off lately. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tom Fitzgerald, the GM there, tries to reward them with an late season addition too. And that might be the veteran that they possibly bring in. They've got a pretty solid decor. I'm wondering if they might make a move in goal. I don't know what the future holds for Mackenzie Blackwood there long term, but they might have, obviously there are enough goalies in the organization. They may not need a goalie back if they move Blackwood, so we'll see. But to me, not all these teams, the Islanders would probably make the most sense. I don't know what the asking price is going to be on Tarasenko in St. Louis. I don't imagine the return will be as huge as Blues fans might hope for, given the fact that he does have control with a no move and will be able to control his destination. So it's going to certainly put the leverage in the other team's hands and reduce the asking return price. So we'll see. There's also some thinking that Freddie Andersen in Carolina might become a trade piece as well, but it's debatable. It's going to boil down to cap space, I think. The young goaltender Kochetkov has been absolutely amazing. Rookie of the month has been hot. Antti Rant has played a bit in between and has done well. He's certainly a cheaper option than Freddie. Not that Freddie's been bad by any means, but he's been out a lot this year. Hasn't been available to the team as much as the other guys, hence the opportunity for the youngster to take over. And there is some that think maybe a goaltender trade might be in order. But at the same time, do you really want to risk going to the playoffs without having your most experienced goaltender in the playoffs? I don't know if that's something you want to do, but I guess they're going to have to make a decision. Carolina's one of the league's top teams, one of the, have the best odds according to the odds makers of winning the Stanley Cup. And we'll have to see. But having Freddie Andersen on the market would certainly create an interesting trade deadline for sure. Now, Frank Saravalli also indicates that the Nashville Predators have made defenseman Matthias Ekholm available, which is surprising to some. Obviously, the Preds not having a great season, not where they want to be. He's not that far into a 4-year deal at $6.25 million. There was a lot of talk before he signed that deal that he might have been dealt then. There was some debate but they came to terms and kept him there on a 4-year contract. He's only in the first year of it. And, obviously a stay-at-home defenseman, a real solid defensive defenseman. I think there's lots of value there in Ekholm. Obviously, with the term, it's going to be complicated for a lot of teams. Nashville's likely would have to take a contract back. There's not a lot of teams that could absorb that kind of a cap hit without shedding money themselves. So it would be complicated to do. It would be more of a hockey trade. And I would not be shocked at all if there's lots of interest in this player. I know when he was reportedly available before, there was a lot of interest. I just don't know that Nashville ever got close to getting the offer they wanted. So they went down the route of signing him instead. But another very interesting name on the market that we can watch here over the next couple months. Jeff Merrick and Elliot Friedman also talking a bit more about Jack Campbell. There's been some talk about the Oilers maybe trading him, but of course, like a lot of these guys, it's tough when they're in the first year of a new contract, 5-year deal making $5 million a season. There's not many teams that could take that on. And the way he's playing, there's not many teams that are going to be interested. But one team that they've said might be a fit would be Chicago. Chicago certainly bottoming out this year. Is likely the end of the road for Taves and Kane. Maybe some others on that team as well. And there's some talk about maybe the Oilers looking for a guy like Max Domi in return. Obviously, they've been without Evander Kane, but reports are that Kane's not that far from being returning to the lineup. He should be back sometime this month. So I don't think they would necessarily acquire Domi for the hopes of replacing Kane. And if Kane's going to be back soon, I'm not sure that that's really something they need to do. Now, I understand the desire to move Campbell, the disappointment with how that's worked out. But who's your goaltender? Yes, Stuart Skinner has outperformed Campbell, but it's not exactly like he's been playing at an all-star level himself, right? So you're going to need Skinner and another capable goaltender. Who could that be? If you move Campbell to Chicago, you don't want Peter Mrazek back, that's for sure. Alex Stalock, he's done probably arguably better of the two, but still, I don't know if that's the answer. That's certainly not it. Now, the Oilers have also been linked to some defensemen in Chicago, including guys like either Connor Murphy or Jake McCabe. One of those guys could be made available, which the Oilers are also interested in doing now, and it'll be an easier way to afford picking up a D-man like that, but by moving out a $5 million contract like Campbell. But I just don't know. It does make some sense that they would try to do it, but would they go after Freddie Andersen in Carolina? There's not a lot of experienced goaltending help on the market. So it's debatable on what they do. Could they try to get Nedeljkovic out of Detroit, for example? I wonder if the Oilers could find a way to move on from Campbell, how they would do it. Who would they bring in? That's a big question mark. And are they going to be able to afford to do it, bring in a defenseman and another goalie? It's certainly not going to be easy, but I do agree that it's something the Oilers are probably at least thinking about. And at the same time, I do think that it's something that they need to mull over. But like I said, the big question is, if Chicago is one of the few teams that can take him, you're not getting a goalie there. So you're going to have a separate deal to get another goalie back. And I just don't know that that's going to be easy to do. And will it be better? That's the question. And are they better off to stick with Campbell, work with him, and hope he can become that consistent goalie that he was before? Even during his time in Toronto, he was very streaky. He'd have long stretches where he was really, really good, and he would have long stretches where he struggled. That's the book on Campbell, as it comes with both of those, right? And unfortunately, this year in Edmonton, we've only seen the not-so-good side, not that streaky, really good Campbell that have showed up during long stretches with his time in the Leafs organization. So we'll have to see where this goes. I don't know if the Oilers are going to be able to move him, given the contract, but if they do, Chicago is one of the few places that it could maybe work out. They could be their goalie over the next few years as they continue their rebuild, and they may not care so much that he's making that kind of money and not living up to it, because obviously it helps them get to the cap floor and get an experienced goaltender to help them through their rebuild. So it might be something we see, but time will tell. Lots of rumors today. Things will continue to heat up here. I know the World Junior Championships are getting close. It's semifinal day right now. The finals are tomorrow, so stay tuned for lots of updates there as well. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.